Hey there. Welcome to episode 5 of The Artist in Me is Dead podcast. I'm your host, Rhonda Willers. This episode features a conversation with Olivia House, a Black designer based in Chicago. Social change is at the core of her practice. Olivia uses design to teach, heal, and build community. You'll hear how a realization prompted a summer-long research project that became so much more. And I honestly had research envy listening to her describe her immersive research approach to this project. Olivia is inspiring and reflective. We talk about what advocacy looks like in combination with design, and about how a little seed of agency grew in her and can grow in each of us to realize our own capacity to create change. Please enjoy this episode with Olivia House. Well, Olivia, it's really great to have you on the podcast today, and it's also wonderful to meet you. Thank you for joining me.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So the way we start on the podcast is I'd like each guest to share how they got to the creative field that they got to, or the creative practice that they got to. And some of that might be through like your formal training or like community training or just art experiences that you've had throughout your life. And if you could kind of take us through a bit of that journey that brought you to where you are today.
Yes, absolutely. So I think if you ask anyone in my family, it would be no surprise that I'm in a creative industry. Because when I was younger, that's all I was doing. I was just creating. I have lots of younger siblings, so I'd write plays for us to perform. I would write music, constantly be coloring books and drawing and things like that. But I was also interested in so many other things. Like I thought I was going to be a therapist, maybe a teacher, a doctor, president of the United States.
Love it.
But I mean, the constant has always been art for sure. And so when I got to high school, I was really wondering what I could do with art, because my parents kind of made it known right away, like, you're not going to school for art, like you're not doing that. And which sucked. And I'm also, partly grateful for that, because it made me choose a focus approach to art. But they're also very like analytical people. We're opposites, complete opposites. I'm like over here creating, and they're like numbers, black, white, like no gray area. So I was like oh my gosh, I'm just like the outcast of the family in that way. So they really wanted me to go into like business or marketing or something like that. And so I started kind of looking into those fields, and obviously was disappointed, because I was like, I don't see where I fit in here. This wouldn't be fun for me. But I started looking into like marketing. I was like, okay, they're pretty creative. They can be pretty creative in that way. And so I like signed up for a marketing class at my high school. And in that class, like we were talking about, like campaigns, all that stuff. But an organization called the Brand Lab came into our class, and they're a nonprofit in Minneapolis hoping to diversify the marketing and advertising industries. And so they came in and talked about like what marketing and advertising really was. And they were talking about all the different roles. And then they talked about graphic design for a little bit. And so I remember going home and I was like, okay, interesting. I was like, looking it up, and I was like, oh, so this is art kind of, and business kind of. Like I felt like it was the perfect like combination of, what I was kind of expected to go into and what I really wanted to go into.
Yeah.
I also thought it was perfect because while I loved art, I didn't consider myself like a great fine artist. Like I didn't consider myself to be great at drawing or painting or anything like that. So I was like, computer, I can do that. I feel like I can do that. And I love color, and I'd be able to do that in design. And I love like typography. I'd be able to do that. And so I really just dove head first. I applied to an internship with the Brand Lab that summer and I got it. And so I worked at an ad agency and talked to their graphic designers and got set up with like mini projects. And I was like, I just fell in love with design. I was like, yeah,
wow,
this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
So that was great because that was all in high school. And so when I graduated, I was like, oh, I'm majoring in graphic design. That's what I want to do. And honestly, I was like, wow, I've made all of my life choices now. I'm going to go into design. I'm going to work in advertising. I'm going to love it. I'm going to be making logos and stuff. And that's going to be my life. Like, it's going to be great. And then I went to Augsburg. And yeah, I knew I was majoring in graphic design and I knew their program was like really just starting up. My first year there was the first year they offered it as a major and not just a certificate. So like we're all like growing and moving together. And in my sophomore year, I had a class. It wasn't even a class. It's called Design and Agency. And yeah, we were like a real design agency. We worked on real work. I was like, okay, so this is interesting. It's different than advertising because we're working on these like community projects and people were working on like exhibits and stuff. And I was like, okay, so there's more to design than just logos. That's cool.
More than just logos.
I was like, whoa, okay. And then that summer, I needed research hours for my program. And so I decided to do Ergo that summer, which is a summer research program. I was like, I want to combine design with this, obviously, to make this a really fun summer. And I was talking to my mentor. We were kind of talking about design, and I started being really socially and politically active that year and was getting into grassroots organizations and like social justice issues. I was like, I really want to combine all these things I'm kind of interested in. So we were talking about like Black designers and how like we don't know anything about them. So I decided to just, research the history of Black designers. And at the end of that summer, I ended up designing an exhibit to house all this information. And that's when my mind, like everything I thought graphic design could be just like blew up. Advertising, I don't know. I'm past that. I guess I'm on a new path now. I don't know what that path is or what it looks like, but I know that I want it to be more than, just like logos and stuff. And so that was the start of where my practice is today. And I don't really know what to call it. It is a mix of like design and art and public art. And I find myself really on that tightrope of like, is it design? Is it art? Am I a designer? Am I an artist? How are they connected? All of that. So that's kind of the journey.
Yeah. And maybe what you're doing, what you are doing, not maybe, you're building a new definition. You're building something that is your own. And it makes me think about an interview I heard with John Batiste. Are you familiar with him as a musician? Oh my God, I could listen to him talk about creativity all the time. But he was talking just about music and his album, I'll paraphrase it, but essentially bringing in every influence as a valid influence. And then in another interview, he was talking about, because he's classically trained as well, but unlearning what we are taught as being a harmonious connection or sound, and how do we make new sounds and teach ourselves to know that that is also a really harmonious sound.
Yes, I love that.
And that feels like what you're doing with your work is you're making your own new harmonious sound. And
yes.
So you're not going to fit, right? You're not going to fit in these categories to compare against, because each one of those categories will tell you this is not your category. You're doing something else with this. So that doesn't fit here. So you're making your own, which is exciting, but also hard, right? Because you don't have a name for it yet. And so maybe that's something you'll do because you have skill sets. You'll come up with a name for what this is that you do.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. And yeah, I think it is cool because there have been other designers that are like, wow, you're right. I didn't realize there was so much more to design, and I love this and this. And yeah, I can like pave a new path. So it's been really exciting to see that.
Is it, well, actually, there's something, this is what I wanted to ask you about. As you're going along and you're describing this path that you came upon and the different ways that you changed and saw things and then were inspired by those things and connected to those things, what is your process, or what do you listen to that tells you this is where you need to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on gut feelings for sure. I know that feeling in my gut, and I listen to it definitely. And I think listening to myself has been the greatest in that, because yeah, I feel like there have been projects or even opportunities that would lead to like different paths, and they don't feel right. So I really go based on that, like even bodily feeling of like imagining myself going down that path. I'm like, I don't really like how that feels. Like that doesn't feel or sit right physically. And so I'm really in tune to that. I listen to myself. That doesn't mean I don't ever doubt myself, because I definitely a lot. I question it all the time. But I definitely do. I trust my gut. I listen to it.
If somebody, because I shouldn't say if somebody, we know that other people struggle with trusting their gut. Is there a bit of wisdom that you would share with them about those first steps into trusting your gut and trusting what you feel in your body and your emotions, and what you also described as like in your vision? You took time to envision what those next steps in that decision would look like. So you were seeing what the future might be. What wisdom could you share with somebody who's just trying to take some of those first steps?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't exactly call it isolation, but there's something about just being with yourself. I think one of the things I used to do a lot was anything that came up, I would immediately go to someone else. And while it's helpful to like really talk through things and like hear what they think, I never took the time to like consider what I thought.
It's so true.
Right. Like we go to other people to, like validate, to like sway us one way. Cause I mean, that is, like that's obviously a common thing. And it is helpful to, again, like talk through it, hear what someone else has to say. But I like doing that after I've really sat with it. So really just taking time to feel those things, because again, like we tend to not want to feel uncomfortable, especially physically, like that physical feeling of fear or anxiety. Like we really don't like sit with that. And so I don't know, just like taking a day to yourself, even a couple hours, an hour, to like sit there and like feel what you're feeling. And like think about that. Journaling really helped me with that. So like journaling just all my thoughts, not even sentences, just like random words, and just like, this is literally what I'm feeling in my body right now. And then coming back to it the next day. That really helped me in the beginning. And then just taking it further every time and just like sitting with it a little more.
I love that. Because you're right. It's a hard thing to stop and sit and just, I wrote down, ask yourself first. Yeah. Like that is just, like so simple and so hard at this, like both things. It's all the things, but it's true. Like ask yourself first. Just pause and ask yourself first. Oh,
yes, exactly. Yeah. And I had a mentor. I think he really helped me with this and starting to realize that, because I started coming to him with things like, which job should I take? Should I do this? Should I decide to do this? And I swear the first thing he asked me was, well, what do you feel about it? And I remember that being so like I came to you. What do you mean? What do I feel about it? What do you feel about it? And that's when I realized, like, yeah, I haven't even been asking myself first. I'm immediately, I feel it. I feel a conflicting thing. And I'm like, someone else help influence this somehow. But I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. How do I feel about it?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to follow up this conversation, this part of it with, did you have someone model that for you so that you could know, like, yeah, I should check in with myself first? Or even, did you have anyone model for you this practice of trusting your gut throughout your life? Or was that something you came to on your own?
Yeah, I think that it's something. So like I said, I'm the oldest sibling. And so a lot of what I've had to do is figure things out on my own. And honestly, my gut feeling is something that I've been the most consistent part of my life. And like, that doesn't mean I've always listened to it, but really, even when I just knew that I had that feeling. But I would say, I don't know, my parents are good in that way. And my dad is too. He really just goes with what he feels. And, sometimes that's hard. Like we're both very stubborn people. So like to see that, I didn't always see that as a positive growing up. Like, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what you think, but like, what about me? But he did. He always went with what his gut felt with any of his decisions that he made in business, job, like any of that. Like he went with what he felt. And so, yeah, I mean, he modeled that from day one for me.
So I want to tie back to part of your introduction in the way that you were describing your experience getting into creativity too, is that, your family your family of origin isn't creative, right? Like that wasn't their inclination. Like the way I think about it is like spreadsheet people, like there's people who speak through spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Like there's that. And then if you're familiar with Google Jamboard, I feel like then there's people who are a Jamboard. And kind of how we talk to each other.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up and you had these inclinations, you talked about making plays for your siblings to be a part of. Are there other creative experiences that really stand out to you that you remember from your childhood or your early life that you could share and describe? You could describe the physicality of what it looked like, what it felt like. Any way you want to take that question.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, there's so much. I think, wow. Well, I guess one thing I think about is when I was in elementary school and we were having our like student council elections. Like I was in like 5th or 6th grade. But we were having elections and stuff, and you could campaign however you wanted. And immediately I was like, I want to make posters. Like I want to make posters. And I remember making them, and like I'm not even thinking about like student council. I'm not, that's not on my mind at all. It's literally just about like making these posters and like writing the words out and what colors I was going to use. And I remember staying up all night and all through those nights doing that, and like where I would put them up in the school and things like that. Like I said, not even thinking
not about the student. That was just the vehicle to get you to the poster.
Yes. And I just loved it. I loved it. And just seeing people interact with the posters, like, oh, I will never forget that feeling of just like walking behind people. They're like looking at it and like laughing at the slogan, or just even just like looking at it. And just the feeling that gave me of seeing people interact with what I made. I just loved that entire making experience.
Yeah, that feels so real. I remember sharing with some students one time that when kind of it's a twofold experience, but when you see art that you really connect with, it's sort of like you fall in love because you're like, that person also sees the world a little like how I see the world or something, or they challenge you to see the world differently, but there's something about that that feels really deep. And then the same when you're the maker and somebody falls in love with your work or connects with your work, it's like, oh, we share something. And like the connectedness that comes from that moment, it helps us. And sometimes it's really surprising who connects with your work. It's not always who you think it's going to be.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's kind of that experience too is part of it. So I'm wondering too, there's so many things I want to talk to you about because I'm just like, oh my goodness. I want to talk a little bit about, if we can, how, when you had that experience with the brand lab and the awareness that they sort of opened up for you about what this career could be like, that graphic design was part of it, but also it sounds like activism came in from that time too, right? Or that was part of their mission?
No,
well, or not in that one?
A little bit. I think their mission of changing the marketing and advertising industry, that was a little seed that was planted in me about like the idea of making change.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first time that I was really exposed to that on a first person, I guess, sort of level of like, wow, even me being in this program is a part of change somehow.
Oh, yeah. Whoa. That's huge.
Yes.
You being present in that program as a student enrolled is part of the change. Exactly.
Yeah. And they really made that known to us in a very unique way, and sort of in a way that gave us a little bit of agency of being like, yeah, like you're doing this, like you think, like we are not your saviors in that way, like you wanting to do this and pursuing this, like you really are. We're just kind of a gateway to that. So I think being a part of that experience of like, yeah, this is important, like this is change. And then in college, starting to like really be exposed to like world issues, local issues, racial issues that I hadn't really engaged with. Having that seed planted of like knowing that I can create change, and then seeing these issues and wanting to like be active and not exactly reactive to it, like that just sort of when everything bloomed for me.
It makes me think about oh gosh, I can remember the title of the book. I'm blanking on her name at the moment. The title is called The Lightmaker's Manifesto, and it's a book on activism and joy. And I think her name is Karen Woolward. But she talks about how we often think that activism is like the frontline person out there protesting, getting arrested, and that's how change happens. But that there's so many other possibilities of ways to become an activist and ways to make changes in community. And so what you described too is just like, here's one way that we don't realize is a change in making, and it actually does do something. And I think it would be, like if we just paused on that a lot more in our lives of what's just one thing that would contribute to change. It doesn't have to be the massive thing that would contribute to change, but one thing that you can do that's, and when you said that it planted the seed for you that you could be, and you already are, change. How else does that then feed into the future work that you've done? So maybe I guess I'm thinking specifically, there must be a direct tie to when you were asking the question of where are the Black designers, and could you tell us more about that project and what, I love your ending line, but I want you to share it.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, that I feel like that year, it was like my sophomore year. So like 2018 was just a huge year because I'd been starting to get involved with, a lot of activism, but not even from any sort of design lens. I really just wanted to, like be a part of it. But when the leader of the organization, was talking to me, and he found out that I was a designer. He's like, oh, like, can you look at our materials and things like that? I was like, yep. And then I started designing things, and I was like, that was such another turning point where I was like, oh my gosh, I can combine design with activism. And when we did that, and seeing more people come as I redesigned the posters, like more people being involved, more people coming to our events, and like talking about the website, things like that. It's like, so it's impactful too. Like, it's not just fulfilling for me. It really can like help make a difference. And so that was sort of the beginning of that year. And so as I got to the end and was thinking about this research project, that's when I was like, yeah, I want something that means something, that's a little meaningful to me. So yeah, we had so many talks about like what project it would be, and how we'd combine design with it. And so I was already thinking about racial inequities. So I started thinking like, I can't name a single Black designer. How problematic is that? Because we know Black designers exist. And when you open, we had so many design reference books, and I opened them, and there were like maybe one Black designer. And this is a book that is supposed to cover the entire history of design. And you think about the civil rights movement, protest posters in general, like, we're designers making those. Newspapers, magazines, like we have Jet magazine, like there's a designer there.
Yes. And they're not represented
at all. I was like, okay, this is an issue. So yeah, I'm gonna research Black designers for a summer, and we'll see if these history books are right or people were getting left behind.
Pretty sure the latter.
Yes, exactly. So that summer was really great, because obviously half my summer had to be like actual research,
Sure.
The actual doing that, all the research processes and things like that. But also half of my summer had to be making. And so my mentor, he was so helpful with thinking about what my process was going to be, because I didn't want them to be separated, because they needed to be connected for me. So we talked about like how we could integrate them both. And it was just a phenomenal summer, because a lot of my research, I was trying to find visuals that would then be either impact or reflect whatever in the final product that I made. So we turned the studio into just like this big like research place. I was printing out any visual I could find of any sort of design, CD or like record covers, magazine covers, book covers, things like that. All of that from culture during that time. And I wanted to focus on the years 1945 to 1975, just to like get a chunk. And that was the time where I'm like, oh, I know 100% there's going to be Black designers. Civil rights movement, Black power movement, also two movements that just mean so much to me. They're like my favorite times in history. So I knew I wanted to focus on that. So between those years, I was finding anything I can that I knew was made by someone who was Black. And we were like pinning it up on the wall, having that. I would start every day with like listening to music from that time and sketching, and just like sketching whatever was coming to my mind. I would be printing out like some of the work from these designers and like recreating them, some by hand, some by computer. So I could literally put myself in the shoes of these designers with like the music that they were probably listening to in the background, and like all of the inspiration they probably had on their board. And so really just like recreating this space. And it was phenomenal. That just made the making experience so much better. And
I'm having research envy right now as you're describing it. I'm like, I can't wait to research again and do that. Like, because it's like a totally immersive experience you've described. And like, how rich and filling is that space when you are just in it and absorbing it through your pores.
Exactly. And I had never really researched before. And any research was just like,
Blah.
paper.
Yeah.
Like, let me open this book, find a few dates, find a few facts. But I was like, again, research can be like this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it can
Oh,
be immersive and like filling and just like so great.
yes.
I absolutely I loved everything about that summer. It was just so great for that reason.
Mm. And were you doing this all independent, or did you have any other people that were researching along with you or questioning the same thing? Or is this totally your own solo project during this time?
This was totally my own solo project. So it was just
Awesome.
me and my mentor. And then towards the end, like we would bring in other design people or like activists too, to kind of critique the
Mm-hmm.
work and how I had designed it, how I had researched it, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for 90% of that summer, it was just me and my mentor.
Tell us how the visuals came to be in the exhibition, because you've developed, I love how you said it earlier too, you designed an exhibition based
Mhm.
on this research, and that's so exciting to think
Yeah.
about. So tell us about the process of designing an exhibition with this research.
Sure. And so it's funny because at the beginning of the summer, I was supposed to like lay out, what my end product would be. And I was like, I'll make like a magazine and that houses this information. Like I'll design a magazine. I don't know. Like, yeah. But we got like halfway through and we were like, this work, this information, these stories, this history is way too important for just
Yeah.
like it's way too important. So actually, I shouldn't say that what I designed was an exhibition. My mentor would be very disappointed that I said that, because what I actually designed was a system for organizing this information. So what I ended up doing was I basically made a visual identity for each designer I found.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a total of 8 designers. And I mean, and I just want to preface too, there were way more that I found, but for this project, I wanted to focus on the ones that I could find a lot about them, like a lot of not only their work, but their story, because I wanted to tell their story. I didn't just want to show their work. But I focused on these 8 designers and I made a visual identity for each of them. And so I made a pattern for each of them that was made from an element of one of their pieces that they had made. And then each of them a color that the palette that I chose was created from that big mood board I had with all of the pieces of art.
Yeah, the things you copied and pulled out and all that.
Exactly. I made like a nice palette for that. And then I chose some pretty specific typography because I wanted it to be really bold and really unapologetic in that way. And so really what I created was this visual identity for each of them, their color, their pattern, how I showed their work, all of that. So at the end of the summer, the gallery director, she came to me and she was like, hey, actually, I think it was one of our artists can't show anymore. And so we have open gallery space. Would you want this to be an exhibit? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And it was great because right before that, actually, my mentor wanted me to really start designing things, how it could look like. How would this look like on a billboard? How would this look like as a guerrilla marketing sort of like pamphlet that I would like send to all these ad agencies and design programs? Like, where are all the Black designers? Well, here's your answer. We've been here. We are here. And so how it would look in all those. And then one of the ways he was like, how does this look as an exhibit? And so I had like made all these panels and all of that. So I'd kind of already thought about that, but I was like, what are the odds I'd have an exhibit?
What are the odds that this just is going to happen in my life right now?
I was like, sure, I'll do this, but this is really just a hypothetical. And so I kind of had the pieces there, but it was great because, I had this huge gallery and it's like, wow, like, how do I fill this? And so, I ended up, like I said, I wanted each of the designers to kind of have their own their own area, their own space, you know.
Mhm.
That was really important to me. Like
That they weren't melded into a group. They were each
yes,
seen as individuals, like for and respected for what they contributed and what they did.
exactly. Because yeah, I mean, during that time, most graphic designers were even in the shadow. Like they don't really get credited. And then imagine being a Black designer, your name isn't even anywhere there
Right.
at all. So I was like, I really want to show like reverence to all of them and their story, their face, the work they did. Like this guy worked on Ford. Like you've probably seen this ad. He made it. And like all of these different things. I really wanted that to be a part of it. I also really wanted to showcase like the patterns because I think those are cool. I also think patterns are really powerful. I mean, it's a repetition and kind of it's repetition and it's expansion. It's just like a way for something to be repeated. And I think that's really powerful in that way. And so having each of them have a pattern based on their work, like that's just a way of amplification there as well.
Yeah. And you're situating them in history then too, because there's all sorts of research done on cultural patterns. And I can even think like I have a book called like Patterns That Connect Us or something like that. And it's a big anthology of patterns that come from Neolithic times through, I think it goes into like, I can't remember what year it ends in, but anyways, it starts in Neolithic and brings us through. But if, you know, it's certainly missing information, but just the idea that when you're highlighting their pattern, you're adding them to that line of history and that line of research that's being told and that story. I was thinking too, I don't know if you know about this, but there's a project called For Freedoms Project. And your billboard comment made me think about it, but they're an activist group from all over, I think the United States and even maybe international, but they do a lot of work with designers too on highlighting topics that need more awareness. And so like your question of where are all the Black designers would totally align in there. And I'm kind of like, I need to connect you with them after this conversation because I just think like, oh, you should be a part of their team. Like they should work with you.
Yes, I love that.
It's like, this sounds like totally what she's talking about. You know, with all of this work that you've done about this particular topic, do you have what are your other visions for what this can become at this point? Do you want it to grow? Do you have other things you'd like to see happen with it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So another idea of only focusing on the years 1945 to 1975 was that's just like phase one. And then I get into like 1976 to like 2000 or something like that. And then like 2000 until now. So kind of having these phases, which is great because it's ever evolving. Like the years go on. So there'll be more and more designers. And to just see like it go from like 8 designers to like 25 to like hundreds, you know, in that way. It kind of sucks that I did it like right in the middle of undergrad because of course it wasn't retouched. You know, I didn't really touch it again. And now that I'm graduated, that's been on my list every year, every single year to keep expanding this project. But that's really how I see it. And I see it connecting with other Black designers who are doing similar work like this. During that summer, I met a designer who was studying, I believe at Yale. He was in the Yale design program, the grad program, and he did a similar project on Black designers, but he mostly focused on their work. And so he had compiled like all of this work that was done by these designers. And I was like, wow, I could see us kind of combining in that way.
Yeah.
Because with me focusing more on them as people and not just their work. So there are a lot of like complementary projects like that. Like there's so many of us who are doing kind of these separate projects that are, you know, all in the same realm, but with different approaches. So we were talking about how, you know, like combining all of ours in some way, because this is so much research that we've all independently done. Like we should compile it all together so we can,
You need like an
expand.
anthology. Yeah, you need like an anthology book deal. Like seriously, you need a book
Yes.
deal too. Like I think this needs to be put into print, like in that. I mean, it needs to live in so many ways, but I do think
Mhm.
that is also really important that it becomes kind of solidified in that as one of its modes. And if you could all collaborate and contribute to build that, like you need a book deal. Somebody needs to like
Yeah.
help you all with that of some kind
Yes,
and keep
yes,
working
I
with,
agree.
yeah.
Yeah, because it should be right there on the shelves with
Yes.
the other design books. Because
Yes.
there's no reason. Yeah.
There's
It
no
has to be
reason.
inserted.
Yeah.
Yes,
It deserves to be in that space and it needs to be in that
exactly.
space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, because it's so important. And just, I mean, it makes sense because the work these designers were doing just kind of blows up what you thought design was during that time.
Oh,
Like,
tell me about that.
you think about all of the Eurocentric design with like Paul Rand, like some of these big designers that stand as pillars in design.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at the work from the designers I compiled, and I was like, that looks nothing like that. And that's what you're saying the standard is.
Mhm.
That's crazy because all of this incredible work that is beautiful and sometimes maximalist, like minimalism was really big. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, look at this with the colors. It's not black and white. It's not
Mhm.
Helvetica. It's like
Helvetica, that documentary. Oh my
yeah.
God.
Yes, it's like it's so much more, and the history is just so much more, and their stories are just it's just incredible. It just really expands like what you think design was during
Yeah.
any of these eras, honestly. And
Mhm.
so I really want to shake that up. Like really, whenever anyone talks about design from those times, I'm like, well, yeah, and
And let's take it a little bit bigger.
yes, exactly. So I think it's really, I don't know, it shakes up the design community in a way that I think is important.
Mm. When you made this and started sharing this project through both the exhibition and then your website and maybe any other ways that you've shared it, do you get resistance from people or people that don't see the need for that? Can you talk about some of that challenge in it?
So I don't think I've ever gotten like really any resistance. I've gotten some like weird comments, I guess, but not resistance. But what I found though is it's really interesting because yeah, really the big question is where are all the Black designers? And the
Mhm.
big answer is we've been here.
Right.
And I've presented this work so many times, probably even more than it's been visually presented. So like talks at ad agencies and
Mm.
like design talks, things like that. And what I always hear is that it's like, oh yeah, we have to start exposing young Black people to design. Like we need to start talking about it in like elementary, middle, high school, and emphasizing it more in like college, like that's kind of their way of thinking about it. And I'm like, you missed the whole point. That's not that. I mean, yes, and you really missed the whole point where like you don't need to go build. You don't need to go build. You don't need to. You can. That's great.
Yeah.
But we're here.
There's no building to be. It's that phrase when people say, "Oh, I discovered this person," or "I discovered this thing." And like in spirit, I kind of understand what somebody is saying, but really, if you really think about that phrase, it's so problematic because you're not discovering. Like when something is here, it's not a discovery. It's like
no, it's here.
and instead, your job is to just help move these things forward, help more people know about them. It's not a discovery. It's not about going in and problem solving it. It's just heightening what is already here, like what is already present.
Yes. And giving a platform, sharing a platform, like
Mm-hmm.
just hire Black designer. That it just like really blew my mind because I feel like it's a way to kind of like pass the problem on to someone else.
Yes.
They're like, oh, this is a future problem, you know, that we can start like trying to solve right now. Where it's like, no, just hire Black designers.
Yeah.
We are literally here. And I would get so many quote unquote compliments being like, we need more people like you. Like how do we blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, we're literally here. I
Just do your research, maybe like do your research.
And like, let's stop gatekeeping design. And that's when I started to really think critically and even think critically about the Brand Lab, because one of the ways that was really hard for me being in the Brand Lab is that a lot of their opportunities weren't specific to graphic design. Like if you wanted to apply to one of the graphic design ones, or specifically a creative one, like you had to know how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. You had to have projects already. I'm like, we're in high school. How do I?
We're in high school. It can just stop right there. We're in high school. How are you going to mentor us through this or give us access to these things? So can you talk about that? How I think that's such a key thing is there are systems in place that people think like, oh, this helps keeps things organized. But what it actually does is it keeps people from doing things or learning things because there's too many steps in front of the access, right?
Exactly. Way too many. And I don't know how design just skates by and no one talks about it, because the very basis of how to get into design is knowing how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. You cannot know how to do those if you don't have them.
Right.
You can only have them if you pay the $99.
Yes.
How much it is every month. And how is someone in high school going to pay for that?
And how is a school going to pay for that? And
exactly.
That just, I mean, how is this, how with schools facing public schools in particular, because that's where I know most things from, but public schools in particular, how can they afford that in their budget?
Exactly. They can't. And that's literally the first door. Right there, the first door, because you can know all about typography, you can know all about color, you can know all, but if you can't use any of those programs, they're not even looking at you. They don't care.
This is even maybe a step back, like out wider, but why is it that this one set of programs is really monopolizing the industry?
Exactly. It makes no sense. It's ridiculous. And I don't know how that it just skates by. We've just accepted that it's like, this is what's here. Yeah. It's like, like just thinking about, I was using like jailbroken Adobe Illustrator, making up emails to get new like free trials, like doing all of that. And it's crazy. And again, even after that summer where I did a little bit of design, I still couldn't get a design internship like through the Brand Lab. It's like so
wow.
Yeah.
Even after being there, do you like, I'm just thinking like organizations really need to check themselves and find where their blockages are, and like also make space, like make pathways for people to give that feedback that, hey, this is a block in your organization. If you want this is a thing that needs to be removed in order for you to get the thing you say you want.
Exactly. And it's on so many levels too, because the agencies would be like, well, how, like, we don't want a designer who can't design, like things like that. Well, but how do they learn how to design? You have all these resources. They don't need to be necessarily working on client work. Like, you don't need, but even just
invest in them.
Yes, here's a computer that has all of the Adobe products on it.
Yep.
Here, are all the tutorials you can watch. Go shadow one of the other designers, like I feel like there's so many things.
And while you're learning those technical proficiencies, you can still contribute in these other ways to our organization.
Exactly.
We do this in I would say trades industries are starting to do this now because they need to, because they don't, like machinists, for example. That's just one that's in my region that I hear a lot about. And they don't have enough machinists to do the jobs that need to be done. So they're building these schools in partnership with businesses so that they can train future employees, because that's where their blockage is. And it's like, that's sort of the same thing that the design world sounds like they need to think about, is like, how do we train people in this way?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, Olivia, I'm loving this conversation so much.
Yes, me too.
Oh, it just, what you're so good at doing in this conversation is identifying and speaking the problem and the challenge, and also describing the problems within. Like, it's not just identifying the problem or the challenge, it's what it leads up to, like why. So this is our problem, but all these things before it are actually part of the problem. So we can't just talk about this one part. We have to talk about these part that's come before it. And you do that so well. And I'm just loving that part of this conversation too.
I love it. Love it.
Oh my goodness. I feel like your creativity also, just like your creativity, your activism is just like oozing alive out of you as you like talk and share. And I just am like, it's infectious. It's totally infectious.
Oh, I'm so glad. So glad.
No, it just, I just think it's really, you have a lot of power, and the way that you're sharing and doing this work is contributing to change. And that is, I don't know, I'm just like grateful there are humans like you in the world that like contribute to change, because we need that. We really do. Everyone. I mean, and we all actually have it within us, I believe, to help make change. It's 100%. Just activating it alive in yourself and believing that it's there.
I completely agree. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm like, this is so good. And just like so many ways I could talk with you about things. One thing though, I want to talk about, because we didn't talk about what you're doing right now in your work. So could you share with us, what is it that you are doing in life right now?
Yes. So right now, my like day job, I work as a designer for Wunderman Thompson. They're an ad agency, global. So they have so many locations, but I work out of the Midwest office. So I'm designer and art director. And so that's like my day job. And then I do lots of freelancing at night and lots of different projects. I'm trying to think of my most recent one. Recently, I wrapped up an exhibit at the Hennepin History Museum about the history of 35W and how it impacted all the surrounding communities. So I worked on that with another designer, as well as some professors and folks at the University of Minnesota who did all the research. So that one was just design.
Okay.
Which actually I've been doing a lot of, which has been fun, like working with people who do that professionally, and doing all the research and all of that and helping them bring it to life through an exhibit. So I've done, I think, 3 of those in the past year, which has been great. And then, just working on some projects for some nonprofits and other grassroots orgs, stuff like that. So just lots of design.
And before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about the difference of when you're working on client work and when you're working on your own personal work. And if you could talk with us about what that looks like and how they're different from each other, and maybe also how they're similar, and what some of that push-pull is between those 2 avenues of work.
Yes. I mean, they're similar in a lot of like processes. That is one thing I'm grateful to have worked in like an agency industry job, is like learning kind of the flow of a project, because I can really take that into my freelance work. Like here, the intake and like all of that. Here's how we wrap it up. All that like project management stuff too, which again, slight nod to the brand lab there, because that's where my first internship was project management. So I'm really good at that kind of stuff. But there's just so many pulls. And I think that I do so much freelance work to really, that's the fulfilling for me. My day job fulfills my basic needs of housing and, all of that, food, things like that. But the other work I do when I log off of my laptop for the day is the work that like fuels me. And that is such a push. That's such a pull. And it's sad because I knew about that pull. I remember my senior year, I was in my mentor's office and I was like, I don't want to go into advertising. I was like crying. I was like, I don't know, but I know I'm going to need a job, but I don't want to go into advertising. And then the pandemic hit and like, okay, well, who's hiring?
I guess advertising needs me.
Yeah. Like, you know what? Okay. I'll go into advertising for a little bit. And so yeah, it's been tough because I knew what I was getting into. I knew there would be that tension point. I knew I wouldn't be fulfilled, both creatively and just personally, because there's so many. I feel like there's so many boxes that you're put in when you're in an industry job like that, and especially when I work on Best Buy, and so that's a corporate brand. Like there's very limited things you can do. You have your everything is set for you. Everything
they have their brand standards already. So they have their typography, their colors are usually pretty set too, right? They have their like hex codes and you're like, those are the ones I can use. Right? Like that's
yes. But I mean, I started getting, I was able to combine a little bit of my interest in like change and things like that with, of course, everything that happened in 2020 around racial justice. So many brands were trying to do things, and Best Buy wanted to create a platform for like diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so I got to design that platform. And really, I've worked on that platform from beginning all the way until now, which it's been interesting to see. But that pull definitely comes because it's hard to be sort of as radical as I am in those spaces, because I'm like, this is fine, but this is nowhere near enough. Like, you could be doing this, and this. And they're like, no. I'm like,
oh, how do you handle the no's? Are they a flat out no, or like, are they gentle no's? Like, how does that work?
They're very Midwestern no's. That's a good point. That's interesting. That's something we will maybe consider. That sort of no. And so that has been, I think, the toughest thing, because I think I was just doing branding and logos like I thought I was going to do. It's like, okay, whatever. Like
you can distance yourself a bit from it if it's just branding and logo.
Exactly. But now I'm like sucked into this thing that is inherently deeply personal. Like I work on Black History Month stuff and like month stuff. And so to kind of see the potential of all that and to have it just be something really surface level.
That's what I was going to ask. Like when the depth needs to be greater, but the corporation dictates surface.
Exactly.
How do you know when to push?
Well, that's a great question, because I mean, in my position. I'm in no position to push. Like, I'm the bottom of the food chain on all of this. Like, I'm really just the maker. And while internally I am a part of those conversations, and I mean, in the beginning, it was also hard. It's my first job. Like,
Right.
first of all, my first job out of college.
Yeah.
I'm a designer. So again, I'm already at the bottom of the food chain. I don't know how anything works. I don't know. I have no baseline for anything. So I feel like for a long time, it was like, I'm not saying as much to create that baseline of saying, oh, okay, I see. But then now that I've really developed into this role, I have been a lot more vocal on things. And I mean, they always get shut down, but at least I know that maybe if I keep saying this and keep trying and keep pushing internally, that maybe it'll start to carry out.
Right.
But I think beyond the work, that's the most draining thing. Like, and honestly, it really isn't even the work. It's that part of it, of being like, I'm saying these things and we can't do them. Like, I'm calling them out. They're there and we can do them. I'm like, what do you need me to take away? The money? Like, we can find a way to do this cheaper. Like, what can I do so we can meet there? And it's always hit with that wall. And that has been just the most draining of it all.
Well, and that's what some people would refer to, I think, as emotional labor, because that's the work that you're doing, and it's the back and forth. It's one thing I remember when I was in an education system and then also just through organizational work, but when you ask people to come with their ideas, obviously we know not all ideas can be carried out, but if you don't hear people with their ideas, their thoughts, their suggestions, and also act on some of them, at some point you start to shut down not only that person, but everyone else in that space. And then you also start closing in on your opportunities as an organization or as a company to do anything, because you're starting to like say these no's. And then that just keeps making you sort of like, your space is smaller and smaller of what you're willing to do and not willing to do. And then that limits you.
Exactly. Yeah. That emotional labor part of it is just huge. Because at what point are you so tiny into this box? Like, what can you do? You're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And that's, again, another tough part, because I want to like my job. I want to be good at my job. I want to be respected, and I want my work to be good work. And when you're hit with that over and over again, and your box just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it's like, what can I even do? What can I do?
Yeah. And, part of this podcast, an area I want to explore with each guest is what stops you from feeling connected to your creativity? What starts to make that in the conversation with you? I'm thinking about what makes that creativity kind of shrink in its possibilities. And maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, and also like, I'm really interested in knowing this from each person, is how do you know or recognize when it's starting to happen? Like, how do you see it in yourself or in your work?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Yeah. I think being put into too small of a box is really what does it for me, and what really makes my creativity take a hit. But that combined with, that emotional labor, as well as like not connecting with the work. It's like that combination of things sends me into such a deep rut, and really just, and it's so hard, like being a maker and artist, and also like dealing with like depressive disorders too, because for me they're so connected, and I haven't quite figured out who's influencing who there, but I know things like that really jump kick some depression there too, because I'm not connecting with what I use as a tool to deal with my with that depression. And so it's like, what do you do? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel so hopeless in those ruts and just
Mm-hmm.
feel like every day is just a going through the motions, which sucks because then not only is my day work being impacted, but it's also the work that I'm working on that makes me fulfilled, that's being
Right.
impacted. And so, and that makes me sad and that makes me feel hopeless. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel hope like my worth as a designer feels like it's so low in that moment, and my utility as a designer
Mm-hmm.
feels so low in that moment. And I think the pandemic added to that, but in the last like 2 years or so, I've hit so many of those points, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's because of what's happening in the world, my job, or just feeling stuck.
Yeah.
And it's the worst feeling because I mean, going back to that like gut feeling, I feel it all. I physically feel it, and I
Yeah.
feel it. And yeah, my work suffers greatly because of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're in that space and you recognize that you're there, what are some of the things that you do to get out of it, or to honor that you're in that space? You know, like sometimes we have to honor that we're just in that space for that time, and then and then do something. What do you do to kind of get out of that?
I stop.
Mm-hmm.
Simply, I really do stop. And yeah, I'm still sort of working out, how I do this, but
Mm-hmm.
stopping is really, really, really special in my life. Because
Mm.
I've been on go for so long, and how I used to cope with these things was to go even more and go even faster and do more projects so I don't have to even think about what I'm feeling. Don't have
Mm.
to acknowledge it at all. I'm like, if I just keep grinding it out, that'll take a month off. And by then I'll be okay. Like
Yeah.
now I'm working on stopping.
Mm-hmm.
Stopping has been the biggest thing. Stopping and like movement. In an ideal world, what would get me out is stopping and immediately going somewhere else, ideally
Mm.
New York, even
Mm-hmm.
abroad, going to Paris or something like that. Just like
Mm-hmm.
stopping, getting out of my element and out of this like physical box
Yeah.
and going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And on a small scale, that looks like staycations, like going to a hotel for a weekend and just like
Yes.
not doing anything.
There's so much value in just being out of whatever is your home base or even work base and just the fresh scenery, because you can't, what that does is you can't do the thing you normally would do because you're not in your
Yeah,
normal space. So like there's,
exactly.
you can't do it. It's just like it does. And that totally makes you have to make different decisions. And
Yes.
yeah, what a tool that is to break something that's happening, to like the
Yes.
stale spot that's you're in or whatever it is.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh goodness. I like that. I like how it's both, you're like the both and person. And that's so wonderful to hear you say those things, because you're like, like going far away and or a staycation, like, because it isn't always in our reach to go to a faraway place that we might want to go, but it
Exactly.
might be in our reach. Yeah. To just
Yeah.
grab a quick hotel room and stay somewhere different that's nearby and just,
Exactly.
yeah, have that moment. And early in the conversation, you had said, um, I think it was something like you need to just take time, like when you were asking yourself first what
Mhm.
you thought, and you need to feel what you're feeling and like take time to really ask that question. And the stopping really sounds like that too. Like it's a stopping so you can ask yourself, how am I really feeling right now?
Exactly. I think that clicked for me beginning of last year. Actually, I was working on that platform that I
Mhm.
told you about, and it
Yep.
had it launched early January, and I was burnt out like to
Yeah.
a crisp. I have never been that burnt out before. Like
Hmm.
I working to the bone, like every day, every thought I had felt like it was like the machine was just like cranking. So slow. Every step I took was just like a marathon. So I was like, oh, I'm booking the nicest hotel room I can find in Chicago for like 3 nights. I'm closing that laptop the day it launches. You're not going to see me until Monday. Like,
yeah.
So, but what I did was I also had like signed up for this, it was like a group. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like an all women's group, and it was meeting virtually and talking just about like, maybe it was about like affirmation. I don't know, something.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just like being in the hotel room, obviously doing nothing. My work laptop wasn't even there. And we just had this group, and they were asking us to just like reflect on this. And I remember just like sitting there, and I was just like crying. It was such a purge. And I was like, I didn't even realize I was feeling all of these things. Like, I just was going to take this as another burnout moment of being, I'm just burnt out because I was working a lot. But sitting there and reflecting and realizing all these deeper things about why I was burned out, and like why, and I don't know, thinking about how I can make sure I never feel like this again. Like just sitting in that hotel room, just like crying. And then after that being like, yeah, we're not doing that again. And also being able, like, if I hadn't stopped to do that, I don't even know what I would do now. I was like, wow, that was an important weekend. And I love that.
That stopping gave you that moment of awareness to think beyond the phrase that we're given. Society gives us the phrase burnout, but it's really inadequate to describe what you were experiencing, because that project was, it was part of who you are as a core, as a human, the experiences you've lived and the experiences you want to help make and shape for other people. It was all of those things. And it was your work. It was like your paying work job. So it was so much of you. And when we have those kinds of experiences that pull on our whole selves, which is fabulous, when our whole self is welcomed in that whole experience. But that is a different kind of, you have to have a different kind of system of care then too, throughout that process.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. What you said about burnout being such a light word, it really is like such a light word for something a lot of us experience, because it's so much more, so much deeper.
Yeah. And I think we're doing a disservice by calling it that. Like, I know it's nice to have a word that we can all kind of glam and catch on to, but if we don't really dig underneath what that word represents, then we're not actually helping the problem any. We're just, in a way, we just say, well, we've named it, and now it can just like, we can say, oh yeah, that's burnout. Everyone knows that. Yeah. Like that's not enough.
Exactly.
It's not enough. Oh, so one thing I picked up on that you said you had this is a subtle, like, this seems like a little thing, but I want to mention this. You said your work laptop was closed and at home. So then does that mean that you have a personal laptop so that you don't have to have those two worlds always accessible to you, so that you can actually separate and leave your work?
Yes, that's been super.
That's what sounds like huge to me. Yeah.
Huge. Yes. And it started, the last apartment I was in was like, it was just like a little 1-bedroom, but it had this like walk-in closet that was like kind of in the living room. And so when I would work, I would just be like in the living room and just like on my couch. And so then after I'm working, I'm like, all this work energy is literally still in the place where I'm supposed to be lounging.
How can I lounge if work energy is still here?
It's still there. Like, why am I closing my laptop and then now I'm just like turning on the TV? Like, I'm still literally here. I'm like, this is not enough for me. And so I like transformed that closet into like a little studio.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, nice. I work in there. And then when I'm done, I literally close the door my living room. And then now when I moved, that's why it was really important to me. I'm like, I need a 2-bedroom. I need a whole room where that is work. That is work. And And then now like I have a living room where I'm like, this is relaxation only. Like this is where I go to decompress from all of that. Like I need that separation. But now I'm trying to like that's also hard because I'm like, well, I want to do all my like cool projects in there. Like, how do I separate?
You need a third space.
Exactly. Tough part. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But I'm like, okay, this will work for now. But I think for me, literally having things separate and like out of sight, out of mind. So yeah, even the little laptop thing of being like, literally out of sight, out of mind. I don't feel it. Like I don't feel that energy there. I don't see it. It's gone. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking like for so many people, they've now more and more people are having the opportunity, so to speak, to work at home or work from home. And so learning, and I know there's other conversations happening around this topic, but really learning where your workspace is and isn't is really critical. And as artists or makers too, it goes both ways. So having a workspace that you can close off so that you don't think about it when it's there is one thing, one need. And then there's also a need to have that creative space like you were talking about, or the studio where it invites you to explore, to play, to think. And then that space needs its own kind of accessibility because it needs to encourage you to keep coming, to keep going, to keep getting there. Instead of being able to close the door, it's like that one I feel like is like French doors wide open. Like, come on in.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is exactly it. And it's such like a fine line, but working towards that. Like my studio really is my favorite place. It is the most, it's loud, it's decorated, it's like, So yeah, I think I brought in like a little desk that's in the corner and I'm like, okay, I'm going to work here. And then I have like my work bench where that's where the fun stuff is going to happen.
I like it.
Like wall to pin stuff up.
Yes. The freedom to, oh my gosh. Okay. So like to use walls. This is just like a small thing for people, I think, to think about, but it's not small. It's pretty big. Like different artist friends have told me about how like they were given a wall to draw on or to paint on as kids and how important that was. And my kids were just over at our neighbors recently and they have a whole room their kids get to draw on the walls. And so my kids are like, we need to go there more often. And I'm like, yeah, I need to find you a wall at our house to do that too. But in my studio, that's also one of the joys is being able to draw and write or pin anywhere that you want to. And that just something about that. And maybe it's because it changes what an expectation is. Like normally we say the wall is this and we don't put things on it or there's rules about what you can put on it. And so to have that space that's like, no, you know, you can do anything here, that just is like, it makes a channel in our brain to like, go, all right, now what?
Exactly.
Now what else are you going to do that you have that permission?
Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Oh, well, fun to hear about your creative space too, because that's something I've been interested in knowing. Some people are like, I work on my lap on the couch and like, that's where I draw and I have my bag of pens. And like, it's like everyone has their ways of like having space to work or a thing to do. So one thing, actually, I'm looking at our time and we already are to this, what I call the studio time wrap up. So it's the final 4 questions. This has been, I feel like we could talk for hours. Like, there's so many more topics for us. So in this section of the conversation, it's not interview, it's totally conversation. In this section of the conversation though, I ask each guest the same set of questions and you can, be as expansive as you want with the answers or as brief as you want. It's totally up to you. So there's one question where I'm going to refer to your studio mix of songs that you shared. And so I will do that as part of the question.
Oh, nice.
I listen to everyone's playlist before I talk to them because I like to get in the mindset of kind of like who I'm going to be talking to.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like slightly... It's like so intimate in a way,
It is. It totally is. And then it's like, whenever somebody asks you to like share your songs, it's like, do you share the songs you think that person wants to hear, or do you share the songs that you really listen to?
Yes. Exactly.
It's
Well,
like if you ask me what movie I watch, I'm like,
yes,
yeah.
like, or like what makes me seem, cool in this moment, or like a little cool. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Do you think it matched my energy? I'm so curious.
I think it does. It starts off with a pow. I felt
Yeah.
like in the mix, and then it's like, oh yeah, and then we're gonna dance a little, and like so I felt.
Yes.
Oh goodness. So my first question is finish this sentence. When I don't know what to create or make,
Wow. I hunt and gather. I would say.
Ooh.
Yes. That's when I know I need to start being influenced or looking at all my inspiration, Pinterest, all of those like design boards and things like that, like really just looking, or like opening up all of the art and design books that I have, and just like looking for that like spark where it's like, oh, okay, yes, I can do that. Oh, I love that moment. I live for that moment. You find something and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, this just like cracked the code. So that's what I do. I spend some time looking, hunting and gathering, spending lots of time at the Art Institute. That is like my sacred space, but just kind of taking in as much as I can. And one of the recent things I've been doing is not even looking at design things, but looking at like film and like really taking in music too, and using other art forms to influence like what I'm trying to get at, and like the food I'm trying to create. So yeah, definitely just going out, looking, hunting, gathering.
I love that you frame it as hunting and gathering. Like it's just primal. It's just this, like very root thing that we're gonna do. It makes so much sense because that is, we innately know how to do that, whether we recognize that or not. Like we know how to like hunt and gather and find and do and look. And you had shared too before we recorded that for your on Fridays, is that when you go to the museum? So can you tell us how that ritual developed, just for like a little sidetrack, but how did you develop that ritual and what made you decide to prioritize that?
So I've been here for a year and a half, and literally that first year I didn't go to any museums. I think it was partly the pandemic, and then I think it was fully that. But then this fall I was like, okay, things are like, starting to, nice, I'm gonna like venture out more. And I was like, how have I not been to the Art Institute? And then someone had told me, like, I forget which piece it was, is there, and I was like, wait, they have like big works I've seen. Okay, I have to get over there. So I went, and I was like, oh my God, I love this place. And I went home and I bought a membership immediately. I was like, yes. And so in the beginning I was like, okay, I want to go X amount of time. So then the like membership made sense to get it. I need it.
Like you were doing what your parents do and making it really logical. Like, okay, if I'm going to pay this much, then I need to go this many times to make it worth this.
Exactly that. Literally that. And so I was like, I'll go, like once a month. But then I saw that they have like member hour, like from 10 to 11 every day they're open. It's members only. So it's very quiet. So I was like, let me like try out a members only day. And so I went, and I was like, mind blown. This is incredible. It is, and it's such a way to like start your day. It's just like peaceful. You're looking at art. Like I'm standing in front of like a Picasso and no one's around. Like I went on a Saturday one day during not members hour, and like there's a huge like crowd. You know?
It's a whole different experience.
A whole different. So I was like, this is nice. But the way it ended up on Fridays was mostly just out of like convenient. This is because they're open, I don't know, like Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking about like my work day, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
Fridays are going to be best. I have nothing there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just like did it one week, and I actually brought my work stuff. So for that first hour, I was just like, art. And
Mm-hmm.
then since no one was there, I had first dibs on like one of the working tables.
Yes.
Then I would like set up and like do my work. And then when I had a lull in my day, I would just pack up and go look at art again. And so now that's what I do. I get there at like 10 for the members hour, and then I stay until like 5.
And you work at the museum. Like you do your work from the museum. Oh my God. I don't know. I'm kind of like really loving that.
Yeah.
I feel like more people should do that.
I agree.
But not infringe on your time.
Yeah. Different museum. Yeah. Different museum, different state, maybe. But yeah, it has become just so perfect and such a way to end the week off. Like I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Thursday night, I'm like, oh my God, yes, I get to wake up, get ready, and like go to the museum.
Oh,
it's incredible.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's so cool. People need to do it. Give it a try. Okay, so this next one is I asked you to share 5 songs that you could listen to on repeat in your studio or anytime like while you're working. So I'm going to list the songs and then I have a question for you after that.
Okay.
So your songs were Transparent Soul by Willow, Truth Hurts by Lizzo, Industry Baby by Lil Nas X, Garden by, do you say it SZA or is there like a way to
it's SZA.
SZA, okay. And then Butter by BTS. Could you share how these songs contribute to your creative flow?
Yes. So when I'm creating, and maybe this is really just me in general, but definitely when I'm creating, I need to be like pumped up. I have to have like this just like energy, just like and like when I'm making, I want to be able to like take a dance break. I want to be able to be singing at the top of my lungs when I'm making, just like it has to be just like fun and energetic and exciting. And all of those songs, when they're on like full blast, either in my earbuds or like on my speaker, have that energy. I'm dancing to all of those songs. And I guess SZA's, that one is the only one that's like, a little calmer, but I'm still screaming that one to the top of my lungs.
Well, and it has the one I listened to had like that spoken word section of it too. I love when people do, I don't know what I think it's the story. It feels like somebody's story is interwoven into the song. And I just like adore when I hear that in songs. I was like, oh, it has that.
Yeah. That's her whole album. Oh my gosh, I love that. That whole album, really. If you ask for an album, I'll do that one for sure.
Oh, good. Okay. I'll probably add that to my playlist.
It's so good. So good. But yeah, I need that energy. And I love music. I won't say I'm like a music connoisseur because like I love like pop. Top 40. As long as it's making me feel like I can dance in the moment, I love it. I love it. I love, like, I have a bunch of CDs, cassettes, vinyls. Like, I just love any mode of it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, a cassette. I recently got a new cassette, and that because I have it in my studio, it has a cassette player, and I love the experience of like pushing it in and like the sounds that come with the cassette are like really great.
And it's like gritty. That's what I love. Like I love buying used ones because like you can tell how many times they've been listened to. It, like has that little like pulled out radio. Yeah, it's like a little gritty. Oh my God, I love
I love that some artists too are putting them out with their new releases occasionally. Like I'm like, yeah, thank you for still putting them out. It's fun.
Transparent Soul. I have that one on cassette.
Nice. Oh, nice. Good to know. Good to know. Well, my next question is, I feel like this is just not going to be hard for you, but not that it needs to be hard by any means. But the question is, what brings you joy in your creative life?
Oh man. Yes, so much. Honestly, creating is just, I don't know, it's so fun. But people, that's most fun. That's why these exhibits have just been so great, because there's a lot of people involved. And I'm like, that I love this. I love this collaboration. I love us all working on this. I love seeing people view it and like having those conversations. I love that. I love my space. Like that brings me so much joy and energy. Like that studio space is just, it's incredible. And it's me. And it feels like I can be messy in there, and like someone can stay in there if they want to, you know, like
and someone can stay in there if they want to.
Like I have a pull-out couch in there. My friend is actually staying, like, and they're like, wow, this is like a great space. Like that brings me so much joy, all my space. And I just think, oh man, I just feel like so much, just art as a whole, street art, public art, graffiti.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on your public art because you do murals too. I was like, there's so much. It's awesome. It's so great. But so when you're seeing that, that's filling you up too.
Yes, absolutely. Just, I love anything guerrilla too. It's not supposed to be there, and it's art. I love it. Like
can you tell, why does that connect with you, and why does that excite you? And
it excites me. Well, one, because you know, things like street art, graffiti, all of that have been such a core part of so many movements in history. Like that's it. And we think of it as a whole and don't even think about the artist, but it just contributes so much. And it's like getting a message out there that in a way that you're not supposed to, quote unquote. You know? It's such like breaking the norm, kind of like that fighting the power sort of thing. Like I love that. And that's why that was one of my main reasons for moving out of Minneapolis, actually. I love Minneapolis. We have great commissioned public art, but people don't like graffiti. They hate it. They hate
you know, I had an interesting conversation with a friend, because my kids, when we see graffiti on trains, because that's where we see graffiti where we live, because we live rurally, and we're always like, it's so cool, look at that one, did you see that, look what they did. And then I have another friend who was like framing it so differently for her kids, where they were like, oh, but somebody like damaged that property. And it was so interesting to know that there's always so many ways to see things, but just that in something like that, we have so many different ways that we come to it. And you know, thinking back to something you said earlier too, about the design industry and gatekeeping, graffiti doesn't have gatekeeping, right? Like because anyone can get their paint and pick their space where they're going to do it. And in a way, there isn't gatekeeping. There's gatekeeping in the sense that the response is like, we'll take this down, but there's not gatekeeping in order to do it.
Exactly. It's such a pure form of art. Like we've been doing it forever. People.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's one of the longest forms of art. I love it.
When anyone talks about, like, you know how you like people carve into wood and stuff at parks and things like that, and they're like, blah, blah, blah was here.
Yeah.
Like, I have a photograph of like an old rundown building and it says Pepper was here. And I just like love that photograph, because I'm like, who's Pepper? Why?
Yes.
But it is that thing that since like the era of cave paintings, like we have wanted to mark that we were here. We have wanted to have somebody know that we existed, and that is what these marks in public spaces really are about. Like we are here. This person was here. I feel like a whole nother topic could be about, I just had this thought while we were talking and thinking about public art, and how you were mentioning that Minneapolis has great commissioned public art. And I have to wonder, is that just another form of gentrification of art and of the community, right? Like it's also that it's another example. Like we'll have art, but it's going to be through this certain way.
Yes. And because it's through this certain way and there's money behind it, there are things you can and can't do. There are things you can and can't say. So it's like, that it's a very interesting, I mean, the work really is beautiful, but it's not going to be, like as raw as someone egging some, like it's so different.
Yeah. Ugh. So many things to talk about. Okay, this is the final one. It's a finish the sentence. My creativity is.
Maybe there's a lot of ways. I'm gonna say my creativity is ever evolving. And that's something I've been really excited about recently, because I feel like I want to just like keep doing different things, keep trying different things. And I think it's going to be a new way that I start coping with some of the ruts that I feel, is just like having more tools in my back pocket. I've started like watercolor painting, and I've started crocheting again, and drawing more, and without the lens of needing to be good.
Oh man,
good, quote unquote good, because yes, art is very subjective. But just like different ways to make. So if I'm, not really feeling designing right now, I can crochet, I can watercolor paint, I can oil paint, I can draw, I can make collages. And I think having it be this like evolution, I think I don't know, I'm excited for how it transforms me as a maker and how each of them start influencing each other. Like I can't wait for the day that someone's like, wow, this like design that you made really reminds me of like a crocheted Afghan, like that'll be the day that I'm like, oh my God, I feel like
I am integrated.
Yes, where I'm like, yes, all of that is like, I'm so like multifaceted, like everything's influencing each other. So I'm excited for this just like evolution that's happening. So I think, right now my creativity is ever evolving, and that's really exciting.
Super exciting. It's that framework of in education, they call it growth mindset, and just that you're always willing and ready to know that there's more beyond what you know in the moment, is the way I think about it. Like there's always more possibility than there is what you know.
Yes, exactly.
Olivia, thank you so much for this conversation today. It just is one that is going to sit with me and inspire me. And I know that other people listening will also feel that. And I also just hope that other people listening find and feel their own agency and their own potential for being a conduit of change.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Rhonda.
Thank you. Let's take inspiration from Olivia this week. Ask yourself, what do I want to know more about? What do I care about? Make a space to hang up inspiration related to your interest, and make a music playlist that corresponds to the topic you're digging into. Hunt and gather as Olivia does when she doesn't know what to make. Maybe you felt inspired by Olivia's Fridays at the museum. Maybe this week you'll find a new place to work for a day, a surrounding that inspires you. And at some point this week, stop. Pause in your day. Ask yourself, how am I in this moment? Or ask yourself a question about your future and take time to imagine that future. Sit with yourself and remember, stopping is a sacred act of care. You can follow Olivia on Instagram at lives_house. And as always, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it and rate and review wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next week, bye.